Welcome everyone back to Pommy and Oz. Hope we're all doing really well. It'll be Monday when you watch this, so hopefully your Monday is exceptional. Better than what it was what we're reviewing. Obviously this is the Carlton GWS review. If you are new around here, please smash that like button. We're really ploughing through them. Please give it a subscribe. If you want to become a member of the channel, you can do that. We sponsor Domaku. We sponsor Shangar. It's a nice little community. Our boy Dom cheers us up, doesn't he? With his speckies. So obviously, let's get straight into it. We're going to do this a little bit different this week. Because firstly, thank you so much for the interaction. The questions are insane. I noticed the videos were getting to about the hour-long mark with answering them all. So we're going to streamline it a little bit, and I've taken your questions into account for 90% of the video, and then we'll finish with 5 just special ones, which I thought were probably the most asked ones. So thank you very much for that. Keep doing that. It's been a real big success, and I can't thank you enough. So 84-55, 29-point loss to the Crows, and it's a bit of pill to swallow, isn't it? Let's be honest. A lot to cover today. For me, the biggest take out of this, and this has been an underlying problem with the Blues probably from round 1. I think it goes back probably since these boys are on the list. And what I want to do is put that in perspective. And what I mean by that is these gentlemen, a good portion of them that were out on show that night, Wheaterin, Plowman, Doc, Cripps, Setfield to an extent, Walsh, Mackay, Kerno, TDK, Kennedy, Brian, Newman, Fisher. They've been here through a large part of Tosh, let's be honest, where the entire narrative around this club has been from, okay, they're rebuilding, to fucking hell, how long's this rebuild going? And we know that finals has been a huge, huge marker, not just from the press, but also from how former administrative staff have talked about it. And I look at getting up for something. And when I work in development, there's certain things that I would say that, you know, if you dangle a carrot with someone, genuinely you see a big push towards that goal. You know the pressure increases and you're aware of that, but genuinely you can see, if anything you try too hard, is genuinely what you see. This was a game really that when you look, and I'm sure they don't get too far ahead of themselves because you've got to take it a game at a time in this type of situation. But this was a game really where the finals was pretty much underlined. As it stands now, Carlton have got to win 2 of their remaining 3 to take it out of the opposition's hands. Very unlikely. 1 out of 3 probably gets it done. But if mathematics is in it, 2 out of 3 pretty much locks you away if everyone else wins their games. This would have pretty much had that same scenario where now we're not relying on anyone else. Everyone's got to do something miraculous. So I find it really hard to stomach. So there's a few things statistically that tell you what effort is. A big one here is Carlton lost the ground ball gets by +30, and a staggering 20 ground balls were in the midfield zone. So that's arc to arc. Now, there's a lot of excuses being made about this club, and I think this year I've really turned over a new leaf. I've been positive in development. I've been positive in when I've seen things that are good. And back to my original comment, this is something you've seen for a while. There is certain players in this list, and I'd love to know if the club put any research into this. I've asked the question, and I have been rebuffed, and I've asked it numerous times of the question of the club, direct as well, not just said it, direct. Is there research done into pressure indicators? Because there is certain pressure indicators that you can use in golf, my industry, you can use in my current workplace, of how people react in certain situations. And from round 1, you've seen how Carlton react. When you take away the space, the first stage is a lot of players start to go slow. Really slow. The second stage is the 3-second rule, I call it. The players almost have to get rid of the ball within 3 seconds. So even though the movement is slow, the disposal is quick. And the big one, as you all see, the chip kick starts to come out, the boot down the line, they forget about the corridor, and they start taking real high percentage options in a real low percentage mindset. And what I mean by that is, when you're kicking to the wing blasé, when there's a 1-on-4, that is genuinely a high percentage play with a low percentage mindset. You've got 1-on-4. And it's very disappointing that we saw these hallmarks from the opening bounce. We really did see nerves and energy. And I don't, maybe I'm peculiar. I don't give you a pass mark for nerves. I don't give you a pass mark for fear, because I find them incredibly unsightly. And if you subscribe to the philosophy, which I think all the greats do, control what you control and react to what you can't, you can control that very easily. And that's why I ask the club a lot, do you put that into it? Because you can't, very brutally, to use an old golf coach saying that he used to me, you can't outcoach cowardice. And that's not calling them cowards, but that's saying that reacting to fear and reacting to pressure is a formulation of being a coward. It's a cowardice thinking. And these boys are becoming real schoolboy bullies, because the week before, GWS were very similar in pressure around the ball. Exceptionally similar. And what we saw was very high numbers of post-clearance ball. They were trying to get it out to the width. They were trying to create width. They were trying to get it away. This week we saw 0 running past the ball carrier. It was almost negative in the fourth quarter, which is a huge concern when at the fourth quarter, that was the game. The second half, running past the ball carrier stopped happening. And that's where we saw Sard turn it over, Doc turn it over, Plowman turned it over a few times, McGovern turned it over a few times. The options weren't there. Wheatering did as well. And these are archetypes of Voss's system. Another archetype of his system is taking contact in the midfield. This was probably the poorest part of the game for me. Winning hit-outs by 8 and Carlton ceded clearances by 4. And they didn't take the contact. They didn't want that contact. So when you're looking at ground ball gets, you're looking at not taking the contact. And what I mean by that, you see Arth's best is when someone like Cripps runs in, takes the contact, and he's handballing to that runner who's running past him, taking 2 players out of the game and allowing Carlton to spread, Carlton to really transition quickly. This died. And then you take into the plus 30 missed tackles, and there's a lot more than that as well. Champs Data just does tackles where you could have done. If you actually look as well, go back. I've watched the game now 3 times. You go back and watch the game and look at how many people aren't even trying to get into position to make the tackle. There is a lot of joggers. Setterfield did it. Plowman did it. Even Wheatering did it at times, where they didn't get to the player. They were more concerned about their man. McGovern gets praise for this because he got caught out the back twice, but he's had to actively run 10-15 metres to pick someone else up with a ball carrier and put the pressure on to allow them to be out the back, because people aren't dropping in. And for me, this is a huge thing. Carlton are one of the worst tackling sides in the comp. Still, now it's okay when you look at Carlton's numbers, you know, their tackles in other parts of the ground are very good, but 15th in tackles. And yes, Carlton have a high ball retention game, but is the ball retention game as high as to offset that? Probably not, no, because in this occasion here, Carlton lost the tackle, won the disposals by 3, but the tackles don't quite match up with that because they drew even. Do you know what I mean? And when you think there was large periods of this game that Carlton were behind in the tackle account when they had less ball, Carlton kind of evened it up in the second is a huge thing. And what is tackling? What is pressure acts? What is ground ball gets? What is that? The willingness to take contact. That's heart. And I will argue on my hill till the day that I die that you can teach how to tackle. You can teach pressure acts. You can teach these things. But the execution comes from within. Desire. And we've seen it from round 1. These boys in patches, when they're a little bit pressured, they react. And this week, whether it was external pressure, whether they realised the magnitude of this game, they really did crumble. And it is a real worry. When you look at how... There's no excuse for the weather as well. I don't want to hear greasy conditions and stuff. They're professionals, do you know what I mean? Professionals of all sports adapt to situations. There is not many sports in the world where every set climate is the same and champions rise because they find a way to adapt. And quite simply, against a very young and inexperienced list, they capitulated. And I find it flabbergasting, to be honest. It was as poor can get. It was poorer as poor can get. And is it a flash in the pan? To an extent, we've never seen them completely capitulate for 4 quarters yet in recent memory. But that is a concern because the next 3 games get a lot tougher. A lot tougher. And Adelaide, it's okay people saying, oh, I knew it was a danger game. Do you know what I mean? The same people that are saying that, I said it about North, are saying it about Eagles. And these guys are in that ilk for a reason. Do you know what I mean? They are a bottom 5 side for a reason. And even though you've looked at the other sides in the top 10, apart from Collingwood, and Collingwood really were horrible like us for 3 quarters, they ran away with the game in the end. And that would have been a lot more. If you played another quarter, Collingwood would have battered them. There's a big tail for Carlton. And the uncontested numbers were poor this week from Carlton. It's finding that space. And these are measurements of desire. Finding space is a measurement of desire. Finding a man is a measurement of desire. It's a will and intent. And Carlton have got to be really honest. And I wish the club... I hope the club don't negate this in the terms of it's a flash in the pan. We've got to focus. And worryingly, they've started to. This is the situation where you've got to give bollockings and you've got to see accountability because it is the same players weekly. And you know who I'm on about. Like, God love him, Plowman, do you know what I mean? The consummate role player. But when shit hits the fan, switch kick inside the corridor, hit the only Adelaide player, do you know what I mean? You had Newman before he went off, kick it out of bounds on the full. Fisher did that as well. Do you know what I mean? You've got players running inside 50 unmanned and players taking it on. Cripper did that horrible dink kick. Do you know what I mean? You had Fisher running inside 50. He did that. It's them situations there where you really have to look at your pressure indicators in how people react to it. And the big one for me is how many fucking handballs do you see they handball to people behind them who are being tackled? It's an accountability issue there. And that for me is a big concern for Voss. Because this pressure here is a 2 out of 10. It's probably 5 out of 10 next week. If you lose that, it's 8 out of 10. And then Collingwood is a must-win game at that situation. If you lose them, that's a 10 out of 10 game. And then finals brings a whole new wave of pressure. There's also a bit of freedom as well in a way. Because obviously they've done something. But when you watch that game, they strayed away from the fundamentals of Voss's game plan. And the fundamentals from Voss's game plan are being at the fall of the ball in the forward 50. That's why we've got players that are leading inside 50 tackle counts. It's about taking contact and giving it off. It's about playing it at the back of stoppages and clearances and getting them post-clearance numbers up and getting it out wide. This is a big thing. And the team defence, when them pressure, Voss's whole mantra, team defence, team offence, when the midfield isn't getting them tackles, when people aren't stopping it, you saw it. That beautiful footage there where Darcy Fogarty bounces off 4 players. That is their fault because that tackle was horrific. But go back to that play. That's from a transition where no one closed down. No one closed down. These are real fixable things. But you can't fix the mind very quickly. And these are seeds that have been sown from when they were juniors. A lot of these players we're talking about, I followed them in junior footy. They had these inadequacies. And for me, one thing that is really beautiful about Hawthorn's dynasty, Richmond's dynasty, and Melbourne, as they formulate a dynasty, is a real knowledge base of what people do and a real understanding and awareness of what they do in certain situations. And this was, there isn't many, and I don't want to hear you would have taken 12 wins at the start of the year, because that is the anticipus of why people are shit. When people rest on basics being done and rests on mild milestones, you never get better. You never get better. If you start patting yourself on the back too hard when you're comparing, take drugs for example, if you start patting yourself on the back because you're 24 hours clean, chances are you're probably going to fold eventually. If you start acting like, oh, that's fine, I'll go back and hang around with my old mates, I'll go out on the beers. It's about having an awareness of the journey. And at the moment, for me, if Carlton are 8-2 and miss finals, that is catastrophic, because that opens a new door mentally as well. At the moment, they've never been in this mental situation. They get this close and they miss it. Fuck me. Voss has got an impossible job. And I'll use that logic in this. If you'd said at the start of the game, Cripper, Walsh would have 40 and Doc would have 30, guaranteed 90% of you would have gone, fucking hell, we win this game by about 80. And there's the problem. There's the problem. You've got huge problems when Jack Silvani is coming on, and albeit he was dropped, so he will have a motivator more than a lot of the players. But in half a game, he had 4 tackles, and this was a tackle fest. And there wasn't the will and intent. There wasn't the will and intent. I look at PeterV winning them hitouts. His second efforts were woeful, and these are wills and intents. And then I asked the question, was Jesus dropped to accommodate PeterV? And if he was, why? Because either he didn't trust his body, or what? Because I'll give PeterV, it was poor. It was really poor. I look at some of these numbers as well this week, and it's scary. Adam Cerra is probably one of the most guiltiest players of this. Getting a decent amount of ball and getting 0 meterage gains from what he's doing. And he's a massive guilty party of getting the ball and not looking for an overlap run and going short and really looking to put pressure on his teammates. And that fourth quarter, that last 10 minutes, is probably one of the lowest moments I felt as a Carlton fan. Lowest moments I've felt. Because that was what we did to GWS. That was us queuing in the rack in the most important game. And this is a fragile group. And you can't give sympathy when it's something that's been repetitive. You can't. I mean, it's alright giving them sympathy in 2017, 2018, to an extent. And where do you go from here? Well, they've got to identify that, and they've got to identify how they do it. Lockie O'Brien came under a bit of criticism this week, but did his job in the terms of getting high metres gained and getting Carlton going. The big thing with Lockie O'Brien is him and Cottrell, him and Setterfield, they didn't keep their width. When pressure comes, these two start to pinch it in to help their mates out. The spread is terrible under pressure, and it's a reaction from seeing their troops, their mates, struggle. And then if you go into the coaching box, some of these decisions were balmy. Balmy. Waitering on Tex, doing what he wanted. And we go back to other mobile forwards, and there's been a pattern. TDK takes them when they go out of 50. He slots back. Waitering then becomes the extra in there. Now we've got McGovern there, so you can have the extra. You look at round 1 and round 2 when we played with this identical forward line. So you've got to remember Voss was saying, oh, I don't think we can fit him in. He won a good amount of games. You know what I mean? He was almost unbeaten with this structure. TDK slotted back, and if you go back to that Sydney game, we talked about how Buddy could be negated with the TDK Waitering Young combo, and it was. It worked. And Tex's came at Buddy. Bizarre. And I don't think it's arrogance. I really don't. I fail to see Voss being arrogant and thinking he'd win this game. But the 3 games they've lost this year that really beggar belief is Adelaide, is Gold Coast, and is St Kilda. Them 3 games confused the fuck out of me. And Richmond as well, I'll throw that in. Because all 4 of them teams play a set way. A set way that a blind man can tell you how they play. And all 4 games, Carlton had no idea how to play it. And they've had 3 weeks of building up to how the Crows play. Real strong clearance side, real strong pressure around the ball. They make it tough. And it's almost like they thought they were going to play Eagles again. And that's a lack of intent. That's a lack of heart. And I'm so angry, and I'm not giving up on them. But you've got to start asking questions. And if you don't start asking questions, you can't fix it. And I subscribe to the 3 bollockings a year. I gave them it against Gold Coast. Gave them it against St Kilda, and I'm going to give them it here. Absolutely. It's not what this club is about, and it's not what we're building. And this isn't part of development. When people say it's part of development, it's a lack of understanding of development. Because here, this is the basics. And there's an old saying that I use to my staff. When you forget the basics, that is arrogance in your own ability. That is forgetting the basics, because one thing, champions and brilliance, is the basics are always covered. And then you add the other layers. And these were basics, man. Taking contact, running past, running for your mate. These weren't done. These weren't done this week. And that is alarming. And full credit to Adelaide. Do you know what I mean? Well done, Adelaide. Because you found us out. And the worry is, Brisbane will have watched that. Pre-game, Brisbane will be like, fucking hell, top 4, maybe a top 2 with the way results are going. Don't want to play Carlton. And this week they know, put Mitch around the ball, put some physicality around the ball. Do you know what I mean? Get Cam Rayner out into the forward line. Carlton will struggle and will be drawn into that contest. And that's what happens. You see them lines get drawn into the field of battle, creating space out the back, not having people at the fall of the ball in the forward line. Them forward 50s as well. Woeful numbers, but also a lot of them are kick and hope, and Carlton's kick and hope is massive. And Brisbane will be looking at that and going, fancy that. Fancy that. Melbourne, fighting for top 2. They'll fancy that. And you know what? Collingwood, fuck them, but they could be top 4 at that stage to cement it. So all 3 sides have got something in. So this is something that they've got to go home, look at, and really readjust. So I feel better getting that off my chest, and I hope that made sense. But let's have a look at what you guys said. SD Benny, can you identify why our forwards allowed the halfbacks to bring overlap run unattended all night? It was obvious Smith was causing us grief. Dawson as well. From the opening quarter, nothing changed. We had no run because they stopped. Never let us. Exactly. Players weren't running with. And that there is laziness. That there is laziness. In a team defence, in a team structure, if you're not willing to run past, that's you saying, I need to be here for when we get the ball back. And then in defence, I need to be here when they win the ball back. It's a bit too hard. And that's what you found. what Carlton were expecting was possession game. And they weren't at the fall of the ball. So you watch when the ball comes in, Durden half the time was at half back. Do you know what I mean? Because he'd run back, and there's an old saying in soccer, don't go forward if you can't get back. Don't go back if you can't come back forward. And the coaches always drill into you, they'd rather you be lazy and stay in your spot if you have to. Do you know what I mean? Because you'll get caught on the overlap. And that's what they did. And you saw they had calmness under pressure, but there was zero forward pressure from Carlton at times. From some people. But on the whole, there was fuck all effort from the Carlton. And when you look at some of the people that had inside 50 tackles, Cherra is the leading tackler with Motlop. That's Teague ball, where the forwards aren't actually at the fall of the ball, and it's the midfield having to encroach 50 to help out. And you want that line 60 out, and then you want the forwards there, and you want them to be the second line of defence, because you've caused them to handball, like we do, caused them to overuse it in pressure situations to get that bomb out there where TDK is waiting. And to answer your question, SD, what happens is they're not there at the source when the ball hits the deck. And how many times did TDK bring it to ground, Curnow bring it to ground, JSOS bring it to ground, and apart from Motlop, everyone else was fucking doing what they want. Owens was very guilty of this week. Like, half the time was running out the back, but not running out the back of the contest, was like 20 metres to the left away. And it's like, you've got to look in-game at simple fundamentals, and that is, when you see Eddie do that, do you know what I mean? The ball wasn't going to go too far. And this has been a case and a bugbear on this show for 12 weeks, 14 weeks of Carlton not being at the front of the contest. And that, again, is pressure. Be a bit more defensive. Oh, shit, they're going to win it back. I need to be here. And that is the opposite mentality. When that cowardice mentality comes in, there is space everywhere. For Smith to run into, to play them cute little 1-2s he did. Jordan Dawson did that a few times. Great comment, SD Benny. But it's discipline. It's discipline. It's being fearless. And Voss's system is meant to be fearless. But at the moment, we've got a schoolboy mentality. You fight back. Everyone retracts a bit. Oh, it's a little bit scary. And they try and make it easier on themselves. It's a full committance needed, mate. What have we got here? How do you rate the second half of the season as a whole? Well, I mean, what is it? 10 weeks of win-loss, 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 win-loss. I mean, you look, let's say round 13 is halfway. Do you know what I mean? Because of the bye. So do you know what I mean? The Bombers, it was okay, wasn't it? The Tigers was piss. Dockers was good. It's really every time they've had a challenge, the pressure's come and they've failed. And this is the business end of the season. The business end of the season. I would rate it as a 4 out of 10. Because you've got to remember, do you know what I mean? We were what? 8-2. And we beat some decent sides in there. Do you know what I mean? As the season turns out, Tigers, Dogs, do you know what I mean? We Swans, do you know what I mean? Giants, do you know what I mean? At the time, they were much fancied at the start of the season. Power have come home strong. Back end of the season, though, some of them losses, although you can attribute them to unfortunate state of affairs with injury in-game as well, I look at the Magpies loss and it absolutely blags my head that even though we had a key injury halfway through it, that this was the Crows game to an extent, but in patches. I look at the loss against the Tigers, it was the Crows game. It was a real lack of understanding. The Saints game was, again, a lack of understanding and appreciation for pressure. The Cats, certainly. So for me, the writing has been on the wall, like I say, from round one. And it'll just get progressively worse. That's how pressure works. As pressure builds, Gets worse. And unless Voss can negate it, there's not many ways he can negate it as well. Maybe personnel, but watching the VFL this week, you would be a mental man to make a case for anyone outside of Fogarty and Kemp. You would be, because they played a shit side and got absolutely run over, and they were probably the only 2 AFL players that I'd even hazard a guess. Do you know what I mean? It's a worry. It's a worry. It's a worry, mate. But, I mean, got to stick fat. I will say that. It can be fixed. But these issues aren't new, if you know what I mean. Aren't new. Scott Marston. Hi, Pommy. Made me smile through my frustration. Did the coaching group mess up with culture fabric of the group with the JSON submission? The outnumber of the contest was stark. Exactly. Was that a structural reason? Well, to go back to the work rate, it is pretty much work rate. It's making it easy on yourself. How Voss wants is, if you look at when Carlton are playing well, there's midfielders in there. We're outnumbering the forward 50. We're being bold. We're being aggressive. We've set a wall up at halfback. We've set a wall up, at the halfway line. We've set a wall up at 65 out, and then the rest are in there at the fall of the ball. There's a nice little semicircle around where the ball is landing, and Carlton are looking to make the pressure. This week, as the game wore on, players went further and further back, and in the end of the fourth quarter, it was Harry and Curnow on his own. Like, that is embarrassing. In the fourth, there was a point where we hit Harry and Curnow is crumbing. Fucking unbelievable. But, JSOS submission. I'll put this out there now on record, and you've got to understand how professional athletes work. It's a very, very peculiar mindset. But I tell you what, if there was anyone out there that was sad or upset he wasn't playing to the extent of that they couldn't perform their duties, there's only one thing you can do with them, and that's trade them. Just trade them. Because this is a tough, physical sport. And if you're someone that is such an empath like that it ruins your ability to perform, you're no good in this industry. Absolutely no good in this industry. This isn't playing at the park. This isn't school playground. This is professional sport. It's your job. Bad decisions and hard calls are made. And the way to react for me is, if my mate was dropped, go out there and win for him. Because I'd look and say, you know what, if I win today, I give him that extra couple of games in the finals to get back in this side. Do you know what I mean? And I call my mate to account. So I don't think that's a culture fabric thing. I think Voss tried something. I understand his thinking. I do understand his thinking. I still think we were too tall, though, from his excuse for them conditions. I understand his thinking, and obviously I'm not privy to the inner workings of what Voss is looking at. Voss made a call. I was very disappointed he didn't double down on his call at the end of the game, because I think you're ruling with your heart if you think JSOS in would have won that game. I don't think he would have done, and I think no one thinks that. No one thinks. Surely no one does. If they do, fuck me. You're overrating the influence of one player. But for me, I was more concerned at the end he couldn't get away from that question fast enough, and you have to own them calls, good or bad, and that's a sign of great leadership. Putting your hand up and saying, maybe I got this one wrong, boys. I do it all the time. Put your hand up. Got this one wrong. So, we'll see. I mean, he's going to be back now, though, isn't he? So, I mean, end of conversation, really. Lockie, what are your thoughts on our wing position? Personally, I thought Satterfield was terrible. O'Brien has been alright this season, but was poor tonight. Not sure what the right combination is going forward. I didn't mind O'Brien's game. I think he's not a tackler, and not many wingers are. Do you know what I mean? And he was getting himself in very central positions, which he's going to be coming up against bigger bodies. It's not where you want him. They didn't keep their width, though. And Carlton, when they did have their width, O'Brien was missed 7 times in the third quarter. Massive overlap. Carlton then starts to go into condensed mode of where we are. And you saw they ran in straight patterns. They didn't spread out. The spread was atrocious, and it wasn't a winger's game there for them, for Carlton. It would have been a shit job. Setterfield, chance to back up last week, and let's be honest, he didn't, did he? Was largely anonymous at times, especially when he went down the back. when most of the people down the back had a lot of the ball because the ball flew in there. It was poor, especially when... It says a lot about the mentality of this group. The VFL, don't want to pick on anyone in VFL, but there's certain players in that VFL group that will look at the midfield group, go, one more injury and I'm in. Some of them, a lot of that midfield who were AFL players had shit games the week before against GWS. And it was very lethargic against a shit Williamstown side. That they are a poor side. I've watched a lot of VFL. Not many people in the world will watch as much VFL as me. I watched nearly every AFL game and VFL game. Williamstown are woeful. And they capitulated in a finals race well. So it kind of transcends, doesn't it? Kind of transcends. And the VFL players were the ones that stood up in that game. So for me, it's management. And we finished with a bit of humour. Douglas, how old were you? Sent news to your boss. Obviously, the post that you all answered here. Yeah, I did. It wasn't actually that long ago. It was only about, where am I now? I'm 36, so 30. And I was actually chatting to my boss on my lunch break via text. And I thought I'd send a cheeky picture to my wife because we were spending the night away at a nice little cabin. And I thought I'd just flirt with her a bit. And sent sent my wife my report and sent my boss a compromising picture, but he took it all right. He took it all right, to be fair. He had a good giggle. I owned it anyway. But that's it then. Very disappointed. Can't be disappointed for too long. We're going to have to regroup, but they're what we need to do. Please like and subscribe. Thank you very much for the support. See you next week. Pop out.